Do you still think the Prime Minister should resign and go?
I stated my view. I stand by that view. I welcome the fact that there is now general acceptance that things have not been good enough, that there have been far too many mistakes and things have to change. But I'm the one that's standing to be First Minister in 3 months' time. I'm the one that's putting myself before the people of Scotland in 3 months' time.
The Steamie Politics Podcast from The Scotsman.
Hello and welcome to the Steamie, the Scotsman's Politics Podcast. I'm Alistair Grant, the Scotsman's political editor, and what a week for Scottish Labour. Anna Sarwar has thrown a grenade into his Holyrood election campaign by calling on Keir Starmer to quit Downing Street, perhaps in the expectation that other senior figures would follow suit. But as it turned out, none did, despite weeks of anonymous briefings to the press about their general unhappiness with the state of things. Anas now stands alone with the awkward prospect of heading into the Holyrood election campaign with a serious rift between Scottish Labour and the UK Labour government. Will the Prime Minister really head north to campaign in Scotland, given he knows his party's leader, Scottish leader, wants him out? It feels ludicrous, but that's the position Labour is currently in. So was this a catastrophic mistake, or was it actually just a last desperate roll of the dice by a political leader staring at defeat at the Holyrood election in 3 months' time, and who really has nothing to lose by cutting ties with Westminster? Well, to discuss this very issue, I'm joined by Andrew Quinn, the Scotsman's Westminster correspondent, by David Bol, the Scotsman's deputy political editor, and by Rachel Amery, the Scotsman's political correspondent. And later in the podcast, I also sit down with the journalist James Macintyre, who's written a new biography of Gordon Brown, which is published this week, and which takes a fresh look at the life and legacy of a very Scottish political titan. But before that, Andrew, I'm fascinated to know what you made of this week, because I thought it was striking how few Scottish Labour MPs actually came out and backed Anna Sarwar's decision to call for Starmer to quit. What do you make of this?
First, I think the thing that was really it summed up the whole week was we got a statement from Scottish PLP chair Richard Baker on Tuesday evening, and he said something like, "It's been some week," even though we were only 2 days in out of 5. So it's been absolutely mad, hasn't it? When we found out that Anna Sarwar had this press conference, everyone was scrambling around what's going to happen, and then it became clear that he was going to call for the Prime Minister's head. So it was absolutely chaotic. I mean, I think there was a period where I would say about an hour out, so about 1:30 on Monday, where a lot of the journalists were like, today could be the Sir Keir Starmer's last day as Prime Minister. He really could be forced to resign because of Anna Sarwar, and because more and more people would back Anas's calls. It didn't happen in the end because as soon as Anas stood up on stage in Glasgow and what was dubbed to me by someone as the Trades Hall push, all the cabinet, slowly but surely, I think they released their statements about every 2 minutes saying that they supported the PM. I mean, that was obviously orchestrated to kind of downplay the impact of the Scottish Labour leader's speech. So there were heightened tensions for sure. I mean, it all came off the back of 2 of the Prime Minister's key aides quitting within 24 hours. So Morgan McSweeney, who was his chief of staff, also married to Scottish Labour MP Imogen Walker, and Tim Allen, who was head of comms, they stepped down on Sunday and Monday, respectively.
Morgan McSweeney, which I'm pretty sure, remind me, Andrew and David both said last week on the podcast, would still be in post. So that's another...
I did. I'm sorry. It was a terrible shout, obviously. It was a mad time, and then we had a Scottish Parliamentary Labour Party meeting as well on Tuesday, where there was a lot of tension about what statement they would put out. And I think actually really that was more of the argument there, instead of arguing over whether Anna Sarwar had done the right or wrong thing. It was basically trying to decide. They couldn't come to an agreement about what would be said, and eventually we just got a statement from the chair, Richard Baker. So it's been a mad few days. It quietened down a little bit yesterday, although there's other problems for the PM as well. But yeah, it's some week, I guess.
And David, what do you make of this? Do you think it's a mistake, or do you think it's, as I say, they've got nothing to lose really, and they might as well just kind of throw the dice, see what happens?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't look great, does it? I mean, I was there on Monday when Anna Sarwar gave this kind of speech. He looked very lonely, I will say, even though there were some MSPs there. It was very much just you and us. I mean, I can see why he's done it. It makes sense to distance himself from the PM, and Labour insiders have been saying that he's been wrestling with this decision for quite some time, which does make sense given the polling and the ridiculously unpopularity of Keir Starmer. But it probably just seems to a lot of people that he's left it too late, and he's just got that eye on the election, and he's desperate, to be honest. So you can understand why he's done it. I imagine they thought the Welsh Labour leader was also going to do the same thing. There was kind of reports that day that was going to happen. As we were sat there, there were people telling Jackie Bailey, who was just waiting for Anas to come on, that doesn't look like it's happening anymore. And I mean, her face told kind of a bit of a story there. She was a bit shocked that wasn't happening. It doesn't look great for Anas. He just looks a bit kind of left out on a limb. He can say as much as he wants that he's not, but he is pretty isolated. But it's not going to do any harm, is it? If you look at the polls, Labour are facing a quite humiliating election. And he'll have to go essentially if he loses his second election in charge of Scottish Labour. So he had to roll the dice, and he's done it. We could see in a couple of weeks' time the by-election in Greater Manchester. If Labour come third in that, there may be more pushes, and he might actually go. Anna Sarwar can stand up and go, "Look, I told you this was kind of inevitable." But as it stands, he does look a bit daft and a bit out on a limb.
Yeah, I mean, I think that kind of last roll of the dice thing is key for me, because I said earlier on he'd thrown a grenade into his Holyrood election campaign, but in some ways, if they did nothing, they're on course to lose that campaign. So doing nothing and just doing what they're doing right now is not working. So you might as well just go for it, I think. All bets are off. But Rachel, it is worth saying that we've heard this tune before in Scotland. I mean, the Scottish Tories tried to do this before, tried to distance themselves from an unpopular UK government. It never really worked for them.
Yeah, I think when it comes to Labour in particular, Anna Sarwar up until this point has been so keen to really paint him and Keir Starmer as the best of friends. I mean, I remember this the summer before the general election, he was at a fringe event and he was talking about how, even his children know Keir Starmer well, and they talk about all kinds of hobbies and interests outside of politics as well. So to go from being so keen to paint them as best friends in a Labour Party that's united across the whole of the UK to now what we're seeing this week, it's quite a jarring contrast that I think a lot of people might not quite get their heads around. Speaking to other people in Parliament, I think a lot of people who are not in the Labour Party, the people who are not in the Labour Party, they can sort of understand the sort of the motivation, they can understand what he's doing, and perhaps it will work out, as you have been saying, but it's probably too late. We are now so close to this election, less than 100 days to go. And it feels like a lot of people already made up their minds on the Labour Party. But as you were saying, try something, because at this point, I don't think it can get much worse for the Labour Party. I can't see them losing any further ground on the polls than they are already. So try something, see what happens, see what happens and see what sticks. I think Anna Sarwar hoped that more people were going to follow in line with him and that he could claim that he was the first one to make the move. Surprising that he didn't have that support shored up in advance of doing this speech on Monday, unless there was, and that's been backtracked on. It's quite unusual to see a politician making such a bold statement and then not having a large support base behind him there. So it's perhaps partly that. I think perhaps partly maybe he saw sort of a chink in the armour with Morgan McSweeney now no longer as the right-hand man of Starmer. The fact that he was gone, perhaps Anna Sarwar thought here's a chance to try and do something. I think it's all just a bit too late, really.
Well, we'll see if this mammoth gamble pulls off any kind of results for Anna Sarwar in the coming weeks, I'm sure. I'm sure there's going to be lots more twists and turns for this to come. But To move on to Gordon Brown. He left Downing Street more than 15 years ago and yet continues to wield influence at the top of the Labour Party and in the wider country. Indeed, he was making interventions over Keir Starmer, I think last weekend as we were recording this. But now a new biography of Brown by the journalist James Macintyre sheds fresh light on the life and legacy of a very Scottish political figure. I spoke to James earlier and started by asking him why he thought now was the right time to re-examine Gordon Brown's political impact. James, thank you very much for joining me on the Steamie. And I wanted to start by asking why you thought now was the right time to re-examine Gordon Brown's political impact.
Yes, I mean, I did think that he was due a reassessment. I think his reputation had evolved for the better since he left office. I think he's behaved in a different kind of way to other former prime ministers. And, you know, some polling, particularly within the Labour Party, shows that he is perhaps the most respected of the former prime ministers and, you know, and that he's one of the most popular figures within the Labour Party. I always felt that he was quite hard done by a largely right-wing media in England, particularly during the general election of 2010. And I just thought he was ripe for a reassessment.
And I'm interested in Brown's kind of legacy. I mean, you describe his time as Chancellor as the most redistributive since the Second World War, but I think you also seem to concede that being Prime Minister may not have suited him quite so well, albeit, you know, he gets praised for his handling of the financial crash. I mean, it ended in bitterness, didn't it, his time in Downing Street?
That's right. I mean, I'm very reluctant to jump on a kind of cliched English media bandwagon that says, you know, he was a bad prime minister and a good chancellor. But I suppose that on this one occasion, conventional wisdom at Westminster may have a point that, you know, he was perhaps slightly less naturally suited to the premiership. He was a workaholic. He worked 24/7. Tony Blair called him at one point and said, we need a leader, not a workaholic. And, you know, I think the civil service wasn't quite equipped for that kind of model of working. You know, he obviously dithered over the snap election that never was in 2007, beginning of 2008. He now regrets that, rightly, in my humble opinion. But yes, he did do brilliantly in the crash, but perhaps it was too late to turn things around. He also campaigned pretty well, despite the Gillian Duffy incident. Although he prevented Labour from having a complete meltdown, and he gave them a fighting chance of a coalition with the Liberal Democrats and others, the Lib Dems were determined under Nick Clegg to go in with the Tories, and that's very clear now.
I'm very interested. We've obviously got an extraordinary week for the Labour Party this week, the week we're recording this,
yes.
With Anna Sarwar, the Scottish Labour leader, calling on Keir Starmer to quit. I wondered what lessons that you think the current Labour leadership can take from Gordon Brown's life and legacy. I mean, it's currently having something of a meltdown, and we're seeing behind the scenes some of those vicious briefings that weren't unusual under New Labour either.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's fascinating, isn't it? I mean, I personally think not just that, you know, Gordon Brown sets a good example, but that he's right to call for the Labour Party to make a complete clean break from this Mandelson affair. My own view, and I can't pretend to talk for Gordon Brown, is that only because Keir Starmer appointed Peter Mandelson as ambassador, knowing about their relationship in a way that Gordon Brown didn't know when he brought Mandelson back as business secretary in 2008, although the Starmer people have been trying to shift the blame back to that period unfairly. My view is actually that Starmer probably does have to go in order to allow the Labour Party to get beyond this extremely serious scandal. It's not just another, Peter being Peter, eye-rolling moment. This really is massive. On Anna Sarwar, I mean, I personally think he could prove to be something of a kind of prophetic voice on this issue. Now, you know much better than I do. You're much better placed, much better connected to know how that went down in Scotland and Labour in Scotland and how it will impact on the elections there. But I think it's possible that he was onto something. Now, obviously, it didn't have the impact he wanted in England. No one followed suit, a bit like when James Purnell went over the top under Gordon Brown, and David Miliband didn't follow, and Wes Streeting didn't on this occasion, and so on, although there are some indications he might have done. But yes, I think, again, Starmer has a lot of lessons to learn if he's going to stay on from Gordon Brown. Don't court the Murdoch media in a kind of completely pointless, counterproductive dance. Don't, know where you stand and don't give mixed messages. I think Starmer has to sort of work out what he believes in. But, and I think his time is running out. He's got to, Gordon Brown has outlined a complete program of anti-corruption measures that need to take place. He's gone further again in the New Statesman in this week that we're recording this. And Starmer doesn't show much sign of implementing that. I know the party rallied round him in Parliament the other night in their sentimental way that they do with leaders. But Starmer has to stop focusing on all that and start focusing on implementing a very serious policy agenda that's going to get the party and the government out of this mess.
Well, James, thank you very much for speaking to me. And I should say that your book, Gordon Brown, Power with Purpose, is published by Bloomsbury this very week. I think it's out today. As we're recording this today.
Oh, yes, sorry, today that we're recording it. Yeah, thank you so much, Alistair. And thank you for your coverage and the review and for this as well.
That was the journalist James Macintyre talking about his new biography of Gordon Brown, which is published this week. But that's all we've got time for in today's podcast. Thank you very much for listening. For all the latest news, comment, analysis, please stay tuned to the Scotsman's website. Scottish politics is very unpredictable, but to stay on top of it, that is the best place to go. But thank you very much for listening.